Yellowstone by itself is always big theater, big news. And throw wolves in and it's, you know, gigantic. So we've got a bison jam here, and so this has slowed progress. And so these bison don't look too concerned, so this might take a couple minutes. Jeez. Welcome to Yellowstone.
For 70 years, there were no wolves in Yellowstone. Today, they live freely here, in large part due to Doug Smith's efforts and wolf researchers like him.
We have just, more than anything, wiped out wolves. I mean, it was hatred and just eradication at the best. And I felt bad about that, just as a human, that this was wrong.
Wolves have had a rough time of it in North America ever since the arrival of the first European settlers in the 1600s. Many of the continent's indigenous peoples regarded wolves as hunting partners and spiritual guardians. But for the settlers and their descendants, wolves were the competition.
We used to revere them as a hunter because we were hunters. And when we started husbanding livestock, they became enemies.
For more than 300 years, wolves were trapped, shot, and poisoned. By the mid-20th century, gray wolves in the lower 48 had been almost completely wiped out. In the 1970s, the U.S. declared the gray wolf an endangered species, and the stage was set for reintroducing them to their native lands.
I was originally hired to reintroduce the wolves.
I arrived in November 1994, and Yellowstone, to me, when I first got here, felt sterile, absent, and it just didn't have that totally wild, natural feel because the wolf wasn't here.
Gray wolves are a keystone species. As top predators, they hold the entire ecosystem together. In their absence, life was thrown out of balance.
Wolves were eradicated by people. That was well documented. The job was to put them back. Nobody knew how that would go. I was behind this all the way. And what I was most nervous about is, for myself, don't blow it.
January 12, 1995. 14 wolves from 3 packs entered Yellowstone Park for the first time in decades. They were trucked in from the Canadian Rockies. But not everyone was happy about it. The age-old animosity toward wolves never really went away.
There were many people that hated wolves. They wanted all of them dead. So this was a very risky proposition for the Park Service to get into.
We were worried about them leaving the park. We were worried about their packs splitting up. We were worried about them getting poached in and out of the park.
Okay, don't drop it off.
Before their release into the park, the wolves spent 10 weeks in pens to get acclimated to their new home. The team had to attach radio transmitter collars to them so they could track the wolves once they were released. Easier said than done.
Right here, Doug. Right here. All right, we got it, we got it.
One down, a lot more to go. Finally, their long captivity is over.
They took off right away, went to Red Lodge. I mean, wolves just, their mindset is set up to move.
So I thought a lot were going to leave and a lot were going to die.
Wolf number 10 got shot immediately. And I thought this is going to be a long, hard road.
And suddenly this pack was up the hill, probably 300 yards off the road, just hollering at these coyotes, and the coyotes are barking back at them. And probably the coyotes had never seen a wolf before, quite likely. And that went on for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And so that was my first, I had a camera, of course, a 16 millimeter. And I filmed that whole action. And I think I was the first one to actually see the released wolves away from the pen.
And I'm like, it can't be wolves. And that just blew wide open. We were seeing them all the time.
I remember thinking that my goal for the year was to see one wolf. If I get to see one of these reintroduced wolves, I would be a happy guy, even if it was part of a tail going into the woods. That was my goal. And I got to see the entire 6-member pack, so it was a very good day for me. And they could have easily started to go back to Canada, but they didn't.
And then I started to feel like, okay, this is going to work. And you began to see the wolves moving around, forming packs on their own, reproducing, staying in the park. You just got to give them half a chance and they do the rest. And that pretty much is the story of the reintroduction. Give the wolves half a chance and they do the rest.
And that very first day, for me, that was the proof. I think this is going to work. And I think this is something that can last for years and decades. And it looks like maybe I'm going to be part of this.
The unexpected success of the reintroduction called for a whole new approach to studying wolves.
Almost all other wolf studies was doing radio collars and flying airplanes. And quickly we realized that wasn't going to be the case, because in Yellowstone you could see them from the ground with regularity.
This kind of research drew unconventional characters from a range of backgrounds. For the first time ever, people could learn about wolves from the simple act of watching them.
And then enter Bob Landis. Bob is a relic from the past. He's the old naturalist type. He learned from his father, a hunter. You don't find people like Bob anymore. He is tireless and persistent, and he's out there every day. There's no one else that does that.
I'm an opportunist, just like the wolves are, and I film anything that's doing something of interest. I don't know. Do you call it routine? Do you call it obsession? Do you call it... Why would I go out every morning? And what would I do if I didn't? Well, most of my filming is done from the road, so we have a problem with that. And let's say the wolf is here. And I need to get to the closest point, obviously, because that's the best filming, but that takes more time. If I stop here, then I'm going to be filming on that line, and that's the hypotenuse of this right triangle. The ideal place is right here.
Does it surprise you that he was a math teacher?
No, he's no nonsense. He's to the point. That's math.
The square root of a squared plus b squared is the length of the hypotenuse c. Well, the shortest distance between 2 points is always a straight line, but there are occasions when the shortest distance is a different straight line. Here at home, I live with my dog, Raven, that was left to me by my wife. Okay, Ravy. She passed away from cancer 7 years ago now. Never retired. A good dog. Raven is a very friendly dog. She's calmed down quite a bit, much like the wolves that I filmed that passed. So that's my pack, anyway. Pack, singular pack. And the vault is organized. I think every foot of film I ever shot in the film days is down there.
After the wolves came back to Yellowstone, Bob Landis quit his job teaching math and moved outside the park to film them full-time. He's filmed more wild wolves than anyone else in the world. And he's made dozens of natural history films. But he also makes his footage available for research. And that has changed the game of wolf science. And yet even here, Bob knows he won't see wolves most days. It's a numbers game. All he can do is up the odds by playing every day.
I might miss something. You never know when the wolves might come out behind a hill or howl. But if I haven't found anything in that time, then I leave and go along the road and try to find something else. Usually it's Rick.
Rick McIntyre, retired National Park Ranger and wolf naturalist. Jane Goodall called him the ultimate guru of wolf behavior.
Rick has observed wild wolves more than any human in the history of humankind. He gets after it.
Whereas Bob films them, Rick interprets them. Some say he knows how to speak wolf.
I mean this in a complimentary way, but Rick's the most eccentric person I've ever met.
So I literally went out every day for 15 years in a row, and the only thing that stopped me was I had to have open heart surgery, and I kind of had to do that. Since then, I've been pretty much out almost every day.
Rick arrived in the 1990s during the heyday of the Wolf Project. Many wolf packs settled near the road, and this drew big crowds.
To be there at that time in the history of Yellowstone was really a special moment, as it was Beatles-level hysteria when people were seeing the wolves.
But the visitors didn't just want to see them, they wanted to know them. And so Rick became a modern-day Homer, passing on the lore of famous wolves he'd come to know so well. The star-crossed lovers, the leading lady, the schoolyard bullies, the rare snow queens, the lonely exile. Rick's passion was contagious, and many who came to listen to his stories caught the wolf bug.
We've been watching wolves for 27 years.
I've spent 750
45 days in the park watching wolves in the last 20 years.
I call myself the eagle eyes because I can spot some things pretty far away.
Oh, it's way different. Your heart's pumping out here. I mean, you can go get a three-pointer off the mid-court, and it's the same feeling when you get a wolf walking right by you. You're just like, yes, you know.
My favorite wolf is 42.
Yeah, the Wapiti Alpha female is my favorite wolf.
Well, I'd like to be 302.
My favorite was probably 21.
He was kind of a ladies' man.
It's definitely an addiction.
But for one wolf watcher, the fascination began very early and would end up shaping the course of his life.
He was probably the first wolf biologist I really knew well. He took me under his wing since I was basically a 11 to 16-year-old kid. He didn't get too annoyed with me following him around all summer looking for wolves. First time I ever saw a wolf in Yellowstone, I was 11 years old. I'd come up with my family just on a summer vacation like anyone else.
These are bald eagles in Yellowstone National Park. These two bison are fighting here.
Back here? Mom, can I get unbuckled?
I was definitely, a nerdy little kid, right? And I wasn't really expecting a whole lot. As a kid, I'd get frustrated super easily, so I was already like, oh man, we're not gonna see anything. And then some lady in the lot just screamed wolves.
Hey, there she is right now.
I got her, Dad. I got her.
Good deal. I did too. Calm down.
There's a bear. Black bear.
There's a black bear with 2 yearling cubs on the hill there, and they ended up killing the cubs like right next to the road beside us. So I was like super excited. My sister was crying. So that was kind of the entry for me into being passionate about wolves, certainly. That day was pretty pivotal in my career.
Jeremy Sundaraj landed a job at Yellowstone monitoring the wolves. Some say he's following in Rick's footsteps and may one day break his wolf-watching record.
Jeremy, he's got it down, but he's got that slow burn that Rick has. Calm, persistent. Rick is old, Jeremy's young, so Jeremy's got this whole life ahead of him. I'm a little worried about him because he's so obsessed with wolves.
It's kind of crazy, right? You come up here and you freeze to death and stand out there in the field and watch these animals, and you live their lives from day in to day out.
Well, I don't think you get scientific breakthroughs or creativity without obsession or madness. What's life about without discovering those insights about how it works?
The Yellowstone Wolves is totally a soap opera, taking over each other's territory. We know almost all their genders. We know when they were born. We know who they were born to. You know who they're sleeping with. So yeah, it is exactly like a TV series, but it's real life.
Jeremy's first encounter with wolves, like most visitors, was in Lamar Valley. It was Shangri-La for wolves, with all the elk you can catch. This is where Yellowstone's largest and most famous wolf pack thrived, the Druid Peak Pack. It's where Bob did most of his filming and Rick did most of his observing. But while people were focused on Lamar Valley, off to the southwest, another story was unfolding in a place called Hayden Valley, far from the public eye. A much tougher place to make a living, though the hardiest try. In the early days of the reintroduction, a wolf sighting was uncommon in these parts. But in 2005, Bob Landis caught a glimpse of one. A rare white wolf. And then, she disappeared. After the snow melted, Bob returned to Hayden Valley and filmed her again.
So that summer then I tried to follow her as much as possible. There was one experience where she got into a coyote den that I had been filming since I'd been working on coyotes at that time. And actually got chased by the two alpha coyotes. And with her tail tucked, headed back to her den, something that I wouldn't expect a wolf to do. Since, of course, the prediction was that the wolves would eliminate all the coyotes in the park once they were reintroduced. Didn't happen.
If a coyote could scare her, how would this wolf survive in this forsaken valley? When Bob returned again, she had a radio collar on. The scientists were taking an interest in her too. Soon, she had a mate and a small litter. Together, they became the alpha pair of their pack. They were called the Hayden Valley Pack.
And then I followed them that whole summer after they left the den.
On warm summer days, Hayden Valley seems to offer enough bounty for the small pack. It's as if they've found their own private paradise. After the wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, the landscape slowly started to change.
So wolves are the big dogs on the North American continent. Without the wolf, you don't have an ecosystem.
Restoring that top level has had subtle effects on everything below.
Elk had been mowing down massive quantities of vegetation to sustain their large population. Now, with wolves hunting elk and elk numbers falling, the grass could grow. And this created a cascade effect.
Insects, fishes, grasslands, all of these things are subtly altered. Everything in nature is usually subtly altered, but when it happens over lots of time, it becomes a big thing.
The Hayden Pack has been reaping the benefits of this natural opulence. When Bob Landis locates them again, the pups have grown into healthy yearlings and are learning age-appropriate skills. When to let go, and when not to. Most of the yearlings have gray coats. But there's one who's starting to look lighter, more like her mother. And Bob spots her hunting on her own. Or at least giving it a shot. The young wolf falls for the oldest trick in the elk book. Hide in the lake. Now what? She's a good swimmer, but she's never been in this situation before. This time, Dad steps in to show how it's done. Don't overthink it. Just go for the jugular. By winter, Bob finds them on an elk carcass, learning a new lesson from their mother. How to keep what you kill. As the adults retire, the young ones keep practicing their hunting skills. Tenacity is key. To them, everything is prey, even if there's no meat on the bone. They've taken down the mighty traffic cone. All is going well in the Hayden pack until it's not. A neighboring pack has entered their territory. And it's not just any pack.
The Mollies are actually the longest reigning pack in Yellowstone. They have lived in the same territory for almost 28 years, Pelican Valley.
Pelican Valley is a very, very harsh winter environment. Very harsh. And they're big wolves. And I think that's because they're bison killers.
If you're a professional killer of things that are 20 times bigger than you are, you gotta be pretty tough guys. They were the mafia. You don't want to mess with the mafia.
When they came through, all the other packs got out of the way.
They move with a swagger.
The Hayden Valley pack was operating in the core of their territory in Hayden Valley. And then one day, the Mollies pack showed up, and that was a problem.
And it was on a snowy day. It was in late October. And there was howling back and forth between the 4 adults in the Hayden pack, including the white female, and this larger pack of 16 or 17.
Based on the small chorus of howls, the Mollies sense they outnumber the Haydens. If they can kill the alpha pair, they can take over the pack and expand their territory. Their first target is the alpha male. And he knows it. The rest of the pack scatters.
We don't know exactly the events that unfolded. It probably happened in the night, but the next morning during a tracking flight, we found both alpha male and female fatally wounded and dying from those injuries because of an attack by Mollies wolves.
She struggled back probably a mile from the road where she died. We could actually see her out there in her last moments.
The yearlings regroup outside Hayden Valley. The Mollies control their turf now. The daughter and her siblings are at a crossroads. Their parents died before they could teach them essential lessons.
I started thinking about what that day would have been like for her pack, and then also what it might look like for the future of her pack. A lot of times when a pack loses an alpha female, they're much more likely to just completely dissolve. A family is everything to a wolf, and I think their entire life is kind of centered around this idea of being in a group, cooperating together. I think they cooperate in some ways even better than humans do because they have to do really complex, difficult tasks that are extremely dangerous, and they have to kind of put their lives in each other's paws.
Kira Cassidy is a researcher at the Yellowstone Wolf Project. Her focus is on the social lives of wolves. In recent years, she's observed the crucial role an alpha female plays in the pack.
We all bring our own kind of lens to our work, and I think in the early years, because it was a pretty male-dominated field in carnivore biology, they were pretty focused on what the male was doing. And then the more we've been able to watch wolves, especially in Yellowstone, where they're so visible, the more we're looking a bit more closely at the role of the females. She's leading a lot of what the pack does, a lot of the travel, deciding on a lot of the hunts. She's picking the den sites, so that's kind of the center of activity that the pack will spend sometimes 4 or 5 months raising their pups.
Kira's work in Yellowstone began in 2007. Just around the same time, an astonishing female wolf appeared in Lamar Valley. No one had seen anyone like her before.
The 06 female was a larger-than-life character. She was the closest that we'd ever gotten to a superhero wolf.
She was very independent, very self-assured. By any standard, she was drop dead gorgeous. That's a biological term, by the way.
How do I say it? It's hard to describe, but there's just no question she was in charge. You knew it.
So I was 16, you know, I was just getting into high school. So yeah, tender age, and yeah, in a way, I guess I felt she was like my high school sweetheart in a way. It was kind of a funny thing, you know. That wolf was, and you know, maybe it never should have been that way, but she was super influential on my life at the time. She was definitely the most incredible wolf I've ever watched.
06 was named for the year she was born, 2006. She spends an unusually long time as a single wolf. At age 2, she starts to really distinguish herself.
When she left home as a young adult, she was courted by all the biggest and the strongest and the brightest male wolves we had, and she just rejected them right and left. One of the reasons why she was totally okay being alone, she was a master hunter, probably the best hunter in the park. So totally self-sufficient. I'm thinking of a bumper sticker back in the 60s at the beginning of Women's Lib where it said, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. So I think that was her bumper sticker.
She was really long compared to how tall she was, which made her super fast. She was kind of like a cheetah with a really long spine. When she started running, it was pretty extraordinary.
And to me, she'd always kill them like a cat, which was so unique. She would run up to them from the front and get them to kind of kick in the air. And she'd dodge the first kick and then would jump up and try to grab their neck.
That was just one more day at the office for her.
When she was the equivalent of middle-aged in human terms, like maybe someone in their, well into their 40s, she met someone. And he had a brother.
They were less than half her age. They were very inexperienced. They weren't particularly good hunters. They didn't seem to have anything going for them. They weren't particularly good looking. And there was something about those guys that she liked, and that was it.
06 chooses the smaller brother, 755, to be her alpha mate. He may not be the best hunter, but he's clearly good company. She and 755 become the leaders of the Lamar Canyon pack and make lots of pups. '06 proves she's a powerful mother, hunter, and leader. She even captures the hearts of fans worldwide. But does she have what it takes to establish a dynasty? When the wolves were reintroduced, federal law protected them against hunting. That changed in 2011.
The reality was the deal on the reintroduction, if we brought wolves back, if they did well and they increased in numbers, at a certain point the surrounding states would have a wolf hunting season.
Yellowstone remains a sanctuary where wolves are still protected by law. Outside the park, they're on their own. It's 2012, and 06's Lamar Canyon pack has grown to 13 strong. Her mate and his brother have come a long way in the hunting department. She's taught them well. And the pack seems to have found a measure of peace and stability atop the food chain. But there can be too much of a good thing. The elk population starts to thin out. The wolves become victims of their own success. Scarcity gives rise to desperation. O6 leads her pack farther afield to find food, across the park border.
Because the O6 female was so smart and seemed to have it kind of down perfectly how to survive as a wolf, I really didn't think it was her. I thought it would be any other wolf in the pack except her.
The pack was seen by a man with a gun. He had a permit. I have a friend that knows that guy. He said that when he saw the wolves, he wanted the biggest possible trophy. He noticed that there was a gray wolf that was bigger than all the others. He took aim and shot her, and that was 06.
A trophy hunter had killed 06 and her mate's brother. The alpha male, 755, survived. He traveled back home to Lamar Valley.
And then I remember very distinctly the valley was completely empty of anything, elk or bison. So here's 755, and he's howling out there by himself. You know he wants to go back, and he can't. And then he left the valley. He left his home.
He'd gone through a devastating period of his life. His brother, who he'd been with every day of his life, was shot and killed right in front of him. His mate had the same fate.
All the females in his pack were his daughters. Wolves don't breed with close relatives.
So he dispersed, which is a very dangerous thing to do. By that time, he was middle-aged. He'd slowed down a little bit. He was just starting to gray with age.
Times here are already tough. For a lone wolf, even tougher. Without the power of a pack to hunt with, 755 scavenges what he can. But even a meager meal is hard to hold on to. Bob tracks 755 as long as he can, hoping to chronicle his new life. But soon, the solitary wolf disappears into the vast distances, where Bob can't follow.
So my life changed considerably when the 06 female was shot, because her pack literally disintegrated. There was about 10 years where wolf filming was just out of sight. I mean, you had all kinds of behavior opportunities. And then it ended.
But not one to throw in the towel, Bob soon shifts his attention from Lamar Valley back to Hayden, looking for something of interest. And then, there it is. A striking wolf he doesn't recognize. She's not wearing a collar. The scientists aren't sure who she is either.
It was one of my very first assignments when I was hired on as a year-round technician, was to go figure out who this was. And so I went down with my spotting scope.
After keeping a close eye on her, Kira realizes she's the daughter of the slain Hayden alphas, all grown up. The resilient young daughter had wandered for many months, finally making her way back to Hayden.
And then by that next winter, she had joined up with one of the Molly's males, and over the course of the spring were joined by 2 others. And they started living in the same place where she was raised, in Hayden Valley.
The White Lady becomes the alpha female of a new pack. Kira observes her and her mate over the long haul, year after year. Their bond inspires new research.
I've had this question kind of rolling around in my mind for a while. Do wolves mate for life? And what does mate for life truly mean? We looked at all of these different pairs and found that 80% of them, once they're together, that pair will only fall apart if one of them dies.
But death usually strikes before 5 years of age, after which a widowed wolf will typically seek out another mate. But because these 2 met as yearlings and both lived long lives, they become an enduring power couple.
And it's the outlier in all of our data where most of the rest of the pairs are together for 2 years at most, and they were together for 9. Never divorcing is pretty exceptional.
They have the longest documented pair bond for any wolves known.
There's a reason why the wolf is often known as the gray wolf. Worldwide, the overwhelming majority of wolves sport a gray coat. In Yellowstone, however, and other parts out west, things are a little different. Nearly half of the park's gray wolves are actually black. Wildlife biologist Dan Staler and a team of geneticists wanted to know why.
We started looking at the DNA of Yellowstone wolves from wolves that are of different colors, and we discovered a gene that explained how a wolf was either black or gray.
The most surprising result was a variation they found in the genetic history of black-coated wolves.
Wolves today have dog in them. And it's actually enhanced their lives in the wild, which is just a fascinating story. Through unraveling this really complex story of coat-colored genes in canids, domestic dogs, and focusing on wolves, it was discovered that what led to a wolf being black was a mutation that actually occurred under domestication in dogs in the old world, sometime in the last 10,000 years probably, ballpark, give or take.
When humans moved across the Bering Land Bridge, they brought dogs with them. That is, they had by then already domesticated wolves to be their companions and hunting partners. Over time, some of those dogs bred with wolves. Today, black-coated wolves carry this domesticated dog gene. Evolution favored the gene because it gave the wolf a particular advantage.
And what we've learned is that during disease outbreaks like distemper, black wolves have a higher survival than gray wolves. So one might ask, well, why aren't they all black? Well, there's a trade-off there, what we've learned. What we've learned is that gray wolves in Yellowstone have higher reproductive success. They have more pups born in a litter, and more of those pups survive if they're gray. And what we think is going on there is that there's this balance there, this trade-off between exerting energy to fighting off disease to investing energy into reproducing.
So black-coated wolves are more disease-resistant, and gray-coated wolves produce more pups.
The other part of the story is this. Black wolves tend to choose a mate that is not like them, opposite color, more often than them choosing another black wolf. Gray wolves tend to choose an opposite-colored mate more often than choosing the same color. Their litters are more genetically diverse, have a greater mix of the coat-color gene, which is influenced and linked to health, reproduction, aggression, survival, and it maintains both coat colors through time. It's a complex story, and in a simple way, I think the message is that variation and diversity is the spice of life with Yellowstone wolves, and that's just fascinating.
The wolves' genetic diversity makes for a healthier, more adaptable population. But the story doesn't end with gray and black coats. The rarest Yellowstone wolf of all is the white wolf. Many Native Americans have long regarded these outliers as sacred. Becky Benson is an avid wolf watcher who grew up in the Sioux and Mandan tribes.
Being Native, we have such a special connection to the wolves. It's just like a spiritual guide for a lot of tribes. To have a white wolf, our tribe holds them in high regard. It's because it would be close to the Creator. They bring such good luck.
Interest in the rare white wolves grew among the wolf watchers, and scientists started looking at them more closely too. At first, they identified them as gray wolves whose fur simply turned lighter with age, just like people.
I mean, look at me. I used to be all brown, and I'm all gray now.
But the white wolves of Hayden Valley are turning white as yearlings, much younger than typical age-related coat change. Something else is going on. Some evidence points to genes inherited from Arctic wolves, whose light coat helped them blend in with their surroundings. But the research is inconclusive. In the warmer months, the White Lady of Hayden Valley isn't protected by blending in. Quite the opposite. She sticks out. One day in April 2017, at age 12, she wanders off on her own to scavenge a carcass and never returns to her pack. She's discovered a few days later, fatally shot inside Yellowstone. Wolves killed by hunters outside the park is a fact of life researchers have had to accept. This is the only incident of a wolf kill within Yellowstone's borders since the reintroduction, which is illegal.
This is a national park, world's first national park, and it's inside the park. So wolf hatred's that bad? You're that intolerant and non-compromising that you're gonna blow a wolf away inside the park? Oh yeah, it pissed me off.
This is one of the very few places in the world where they're supposed to be protected from us. And we couldn't even uphold that kind of promise to her. And so it was difficult. It still is.
When the white lady was poached, I had a friend call me, and she said that she was gone. And I asked how she was gone. They told me. It was so sad. We cried on the phone. The way a wolf should die, how a wolf should die in nature, not by man. Very angry that someone could go out there and do that and just walk away.
I mean, there's not much you can do. You have to turn it over to law enforcement, and they do an investigation. And they tried to find the person. They didn't find him.
It's a familiar story. With the loss of their alpha female, the pack is confused and breaks apart. Her mate takes off, and most of the younger ones flee to parts unknown. It turns out the real damage done by hunting isn't mainly about how many animals are killed. It's about which ones.
The story of wolves the world over is human-caused mortality. And it turns out, populationally, they're very resilient. They're a fecund, productive species. And what we learned is that social structure is less resilient than their ability to reproduce their way out of human-caused problems. Kill the wrong wolf at the wrong time and the whole pack can go under. One wolf.
Hunters are not all the time selective of which wolf they're shooting. Losing the dominant individuals is extremely important. And a lot of times you can't know which one's a dominant individual. So with the social carnivore, how important is it when you are impacting a pack? Harvest is a term that's supposed to mean a sustainable level. So is a sustainable level causing a pack to completely blink out of existence? And that is something that I could get in trouble for saying, right?
With the alpha female gone, odds are the Hayden Valley lineage will end here. But in the world of the wolf, nothing is predictable. Soon, reports begin to circulate of a new wolf in Hayden. One that bears a striking resemblance to two wolves that have become the stuff of legend.
I'm out in Hayden Valley trying to film wolves, which I often go. I like to film there. There was a whitish female. I didn't know at the time how old she was.
Bob soon realizes she's the daughter of the White Lady. Her mother was killed, and her grandmother before her. Now, she's settled in the place where her family's story began. But the burden of carrying on the matrilineal line seems far from her concerns. While Bob films her, the researchers watch her. Does she have what it takes to become a leader? They notice she's pretty good at taking down elk. But to be a pack leader, you need to be more than a talented hunter. You need a mate. At just the right time, just the right wolf steps into Hayden Valley. It's the last wolf Bob expects to see.
I look across the Yellowstone River, and I heard this wolf howling first. And I looked across, and it's this kind of black, but it's got a lot of gray on its muzzle.
As he's filming, Bob realizes it's the long-lost Lamar Valley wolf 755.
I just kind of fell off my stool, if I had a stool. So it was like a great reunion.
He traveled far and wide as an old lone wolf. He ended up toward the central section of the park. I drove down there one day. I saw 755, and he was with somebody. And it wasn't just anybody. She was the third white female in that genetic line, and she was immediately smitten with him. That was it. They were together.
755 and his new mate settle in Hayden Valley near Wapiti Lake. They're the alphas of what comes to be known as the Wapiti Lake Pack.
Anyway, they bonded really well and formed this new pack in the same territory that her mother had occupied and her grandmother had occupied, this Hayden Valley. And it was the beginning of a new story.
They were a perfect match for each other. He was quite a bit older than her, but older in the sense of very experienced. She had pups that year. He worked himself night and day to feed her. I remember in one case when she was with the pups, nursing them, watching over them, he traveled, maybe 6 miles by himself, killed an elk by himself, stuffed himself with maybe 10, 20 pounds of meat, started to walk back to the family. He was hit by a car. He survived that. He got off of the road, continued to his mate and the pups, fed them, and then walked all the way back to the carcass to get a second helping. Pretty dependable guy, huh? Yeah. For us to see him during those happy days, a new mate, playing with his pups, feeding his pups, watching over him, protecting him, it was a pretty cool thing. It was a pretty happy ending to his story. Except it wasn't the ending. There was more.
I remember scoping around, and I looked on the side of this mountain, and I seen these 3 black figures come running down really fast, and I said, "Who are these wolves?" And someone's like, "I don't know who these are, but they're not Wapiti."
And once again, who shows up but the Molly's wolves?
And we quickly realized that they had a plan. They wanted to take over this territory, and they wanted 755's mate for themselves.
Oh, I felt so bad when those Molly boys came in. You could see 755 at first was looking, and he was really nervous about who these were, but then he took off running because they were chasing. And yeah, to say the least, I was like very scared that something was going to happen. Yeah.
Most pack takeovers occur quickly. An alpha is killed, everything changes. But 755 refuses to leave. And the Mollies seem confused about exactly what to do with him.
They didn't kill him. He played the long game there of knowing when to run away and knowing when to stay.
They weren't super aggressive to him, but yet it was obvious that they wanted to keep him away. So they would chase him, he would run off just far enough to satisfy him, bed down, and then watch his family from a distance.
During this whole time, 755 was bringing food back to his pups, so still providing for them, but kind of on the sly, where the Molly's males weren't really noticing.
This resilience level that he had was just off the charts.
After a few months, he was pushing his luck. He probably wasn't going to survive too many more of these encounters with these huge Mollies.
Now the Wapiti female has to make a choice. Stay with her dedicated mate or accept the new Molly boys.
She went with the younger guys. Probably from her point of view, what she did by accepting the males and letting 755 go was the right one. She had 3 young males to serve her now rather than 1 old one.
The interesting thing about females, I worry about saying this a little bit, they'll do what they need to do to survive and live to another year to have more pups. their loyalties go that far, and we've seen that before. Wolves live short lives. They don't have much time. You might not have another year reproducing unless you deal with what is the best situation for you. Very pragmatic view of love.
So this is one of those cases of divorce.
But eventually 755 gives up.
And he was just not going to be able to stay there. So one day he just walked away.
755 travels eastward, leaving his family far behind. They're no longer his. He is never seen again in Hayden Valley. Spend enough time watching the rhythms of the wild, and soon you realize that what nature takes with one hand, it has a way of giving with the other. The Molly's incursion was a bloodless coup. None of the other Wapiti Lake wolves were harmed. Things may not have worked out so well for 755. But his ousting set in motion a chain of events that would make the Wapiti pack stronger than it had ever been. The change in the Wapitis was first documented by the newest addition to the Yellowstone Wolf team, Jeremy Sundaraj.
It started out like me basically in college writing a note for a scientific journal, and it was just going to be a description of the displacement events. And then it just kept snowballing.
First, Jeremy noticed a significant rise in numbers. In just a few years after the arrival of the Mollies, the Wapitis grew from a few wolves to a mega pack. They could roam now beyond their range without fear of attacks from marauders. But how to account for this rapid growth? To answer the question, Jeremy asked for a little help from his friends. It was like a data potluck. Dan brought the genetic studies, Doug, the collaring, Kira, the pack dynamics, Rick and the Wolf Watchers, first-hand observations, and Bob, the footage. When the team put their research together, they published the first ever paper to document how one wolf ousting led to a rapid ascendancy of a pack. When the Mollies males kicked out 755, they adopted his younger pups and mated with not only the white female, but also with 755's daughters. Jeremy believes it was the Wapiti female's choice that set her pack on this course.
So her decision to remain with those males was important because typically wolves avoid breeding with close relatives. When 755 was kicked out of the pack, these three males could breed with females, so the Wapiti Lake pack grew to a max of 25 individuals, which is huge for a wolf pack. And so they really thrived based on this displacement decision by this female. The other silver lining was that a lot of the offspring have 755's genes. So his genes are also spread throughout the ecosystem.
For a wolf, whether or not he knows it, this is a life well lived. Not bad for an outcast. The story of the Yellowstone wolves is really about time. The destiny of a given pack only unfolds over time. Today, there may be tragedy, but even tragedy plays its part in a larger story. One that reaches back decades to the start of the Yellowstone reintroduction, and ultimately to the time long ago when wolves and humans first met. The story continues as long as there are people who pay attention. From right there in the trenches, paying attention for years.
I mean, we live in a world of parking lots and plazas. And when you can go out there and see a wolf interact with a grizzly bear right in front of you, or chase an elk, it tugs at you in a primeval, primitive sense, because that used to be our evolutionary history.
The story only ends when the wolves are gone, which looks to be a long way off. For now, the legacy of Hayden Valley's alpha females is very much alive. Who will be next to carry on the Hayden Valley matrilineal line? The possibilities are plentiful.
There are many great-granddaughters. As far as leadership goes, we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, we don't know. I mean, it's still a story to be written.